Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings, a trade to announce, there have been a few more injury updates over the past little while, and we have some trade rumors involving the Vancouver Canucks, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here. Today I'd like to start off with a couple of signings that have happened over the weekend, starting with the Washington Capitals, as the Capitals have signed middle six winger Sonny Milano to a 3-year contract extension that'll have an average annual value of $1.9 million. Now Milano had a difficult time this year getting a contract, which was one of the bigger surprises in the NHL given the fact that Milano was coming off a fantastic season, putting up 14 goals and 34 points in 66 games last year with the Anaheim Ducks, which was a career year for him. And a lot of people thought that he was probably going to get some sort of a deal after Anaheim let him go and didn't qualify him as an RFA. But it was really hard for him to find a contract. He went to Calgary on a professional tryout. He wasn't able to get a contract there. He was released from the professional tryout, and he was only able to get the contract with the Washington Capitals after a few weeks into the season. So it was really hard for him to get a contract, but since going to Washington, he's actually done quite well. He missed the first month due to the fact he wasn't signed, but ever since the Capitals signed him to a 1-year deal, he's done absolutely fantastic. He's had 8 goals and 22 points in 40 games, and Milano looks like a really good player for the Washington Capitals. I think signing him to a 3-year, $1.9 million deal, pretty good deal for the Capitals. It's not overly expensive, and Milano's a really good second line forward, so I think this is a really good deal for Washington. Milano's a pretty good middle six forward. He did amazing with Vigora last year. He's played in the top 6 for the majority of the season so far this year for the Capitals, and has done a fantastic job with them, so I don't think this signing is too surprising. It's really good to see Milano get a good contract extension, and it's good to see the Capitals get another bomb six forward. You know, they have a lot of bomb six forward questions after this year, especially with guys like Lars Eller, Garnet Hathaway, Marcus Johansson all being unrestricted free agents at the end of the season. So getting Milano signed is good. He should bring some good depth scoring to the Capitals for more seasons to come, and I think the $1.9 million cap hit for Washington won't take up too much of the cap space. So I think this is a really good signing for Milano and for the Capitals, and I think Milano should continue to produce really well with Washington. As for the other signing, it was the big one of the weekend, as new acquisition in the Islanders organization, Bo Horvat has signed an 8-year contract extension that will have a cap hit of $8.5 million, and the deal will kick in at the beginning of next season. Now, I think Horvat is a pretty good player. I'm not sure if he's worth $8.5 million. I just think Horvat's having a fantastic year this year. He's hit 60 points once before, and he's well on pace to hit 60 again this year. He's had 31 goals and 54 points in 49 games, which he's already surpassed his point total from last year when he had 31 goals and 52 points in 70 games. So he's done a fantastic job this year putting up points for the Canucks, and hopefully he can fit in well with the Islanders and be a good top 6 center there as well. But I'm just not exactly sure if $8.5 million over 8 years is going to be a great deal for the Islanders. I think in the first few years he could probably still do really well. I don't think this year is really an anomaly for Horvat, but I do think that he probably will regress a little bit. Given some of the other teams who have signed top line centers to good deals, you have Kyrou and Thomas who signed long-term max deals for just over $8 million. Rupe Hintz signed for just under $8.5 million, and Matthew Barzal signed for just over $9 million. So, given the fact of how well those guys were able to get signed, I don't think it's too surprising that Horvat wanted to be somewhere in that range between like 8.1 and 9.1. And I think the $8.5 million deal, given how he's played this year, is probably good for Horvat. But I just think during the later parts of this contract, it may not be the best for the Islanders. But I think for now, it's a pretty good deal for the Islanders. They get to keep Horvat's services beyond this season, so he's not just a rental. And I think that him playing possibly with Matthew Barzal on the top line for a long period of time, those two could probably do really well together. So I think the signing for Horvat's good. Hopefully he fits in well with the Islanders, but definitely think long term this contract could definitely be a problem for New York. So going to be interesting to see how well Horvat fits in with the Islanders this year, but definitely making sure he's not a rental and signing him to a good long contract extension was one of the key pieces of this trade for the Islanders, and they finally got it done. And Horvat will now be an Islander long term. Now, that's all the signings I want to get to today. We'll go over to the injury update part of the video next. We'll start with the Anaheim Ducks, as they've gotten both good and bad news on the injury front. Starting with the good news, Kevin Shattenkirk was able to get back off of injury reserve and has returned to game action for the Anaheim Ducks. Shattenkirk missed about a week and a half due to a lower body injury, but given the fact that the Ducks had their All-Star break last week, he didn't really miss much game action, so it's good to get Shattenkirk back into the lineup. Shattenkirk's one of the Ducks' possible trade chips before the trade deadline, so getting him back is good. They can play him on the second or third pairs. He's a really good right shot defenseman and show that he's a really good defenseman to the league, and hopefully bump up his trade value enough that they can get a good return for him. So good to see Shattenkirk back, and hopefully he can play well to get the Ducks a good return on him. They did have a couple of injuries though, as Troy Terry went down in last night's game and is going to miss an unknown period of time with the upper body injury. Now, Terry is one of their better forwards. The Ducks aren't competing for a playoff spot this year, so it's not overly concerning if they do lose him for a couple of games. But given the fact he's out for an unknown period of time, it does make it a little bit more concerning. Hopefully it's only a short-term problem for Terry, and he's not out for too long, but it is something to keep our eye on, especially since Terry's one of the Ducks' better forwards. And then before last night's game, the Ducks placed young defenseman Urho Vakanainen on injury reserve with a lower body injury, and he'll be out for an unknown period of time. So, given the fact he was placed on injury reserve, he's going to be out for a minimum of 7 days. So, not good news for Vakanainen. He has been a really good second, third pair defenseman this year. He did miss the earlier part of the season due to injuries as well, so it's not good to see him being placed back on injury reserve. Hopefully this is only a short-term problem for Vakanainen, but again, he's out for an unknown period of time, so it does make it a little bit hard to decipher when he will be back. But hopefully Vakanainen and Terry can get back from their injuries in the near future and continue to do well with the Ducks, as they're two good young pieces for this Ducks team. But good to get Shattenkirk back to see how he can do before the trade deadline. Over in Detroit, they both have a few injury updates. Starting with the good side, the Red Wings were able to activate Filip Zadina off of injury reserve, and he should get back into game action next game or two. Now, Zadina was actually activated over the All-Star break, was sent to the Red Wings AHL affiliates for a couple of games just to get him up to speed, and was recalled recently. So the Red Wings haven't gone back from their All-Star break. They should be doing that in the near future. So when the Red Wings get back into game action, I expect Zadina probably will too. Next game or two for Zadina. He's a really good young forward. He's missed close to 3 months now due to his injury, so not good that he's been out for so long, but hopefully he can get back up to speed and continue to be a really good forward for the Red Wings. I know that they have a lot of good young forwards in there, so hopefully Zadina can continue to prove he's a good middle six forward for Detroit. But the bad news for the Red Wings was that Filip Hronek has suffered an upper body injury and will be out for an unknown period of time with it. And Mark Pisic's Achilles injury has been updated, and he'll be out for the rest of the season due to it. Now, for Hronek, this is a little bit more concerning. Hronek's been a consistent top four defenseman for the Red Wings this year. He's done a fantastic job, really behind Seider, being a really good offensive defenseman. Really showed that he can produce highly offensively, but losing him for the next little while is not going to be good. Once again, he's out for an unknown period of time as well, so hopefully he can recover in the near future, and he's not out for too long. He is suffering with an upper body injury right now, so hopefully it's only a minor problem and he can be back in the next game or two for the Red Wings, but definitely not good to see Hronek go down with an injury. As for Pysyk, he hasn't played at all this season due to his Achilles injury that he suffered in the offseason. And the fact that it's been updated to him being out for the season, it's not good. The Red Wings signed Pysyk to a 1-year deal to have him be a good third pair defenseman, maybe a seventh defenseman, and he just hasn't been able to stay healthy this year. Really, really bad for Pysyk. He had a fantastic season last year with Buffalo, really increased his value so he could get a contract, but just he hasn't been able to stay healthy this year. So hopefully Pysyk can recover from his injury and return at some point next year, whether it be for the Red Wings or another team, but just bad news for Pysyk. So hopefully the Red Wings can recover for some of these injuries. I know Pysyk has missed the whole season due to the injury, so him being out for the rest of the season is not going to be too hard for the Red Wings to recover from. But definitely, hopefully Hronek can get back in the near future and he's not out too long for Detroit. But getting Zadina back is a huge boost for the Red Wings organization. Next with the Avalanche, as they're going to be getting a few guys back in their next game, as Valeri Nichushkin and Bowen Byram have both been cleared to play and should be back within the next game or two for the Colorado Avalanche. Now, the Avalanche haven't gone back from their All-Star break yet, but there is some talk that Nichushkin and Byram will be back in their first game back from their All-Star break. So Nichushkin's only missed about a week and a half, but he has been in and out of the lineup this year due to his injuries, so good to see Nichushkin get back. Hopefully he can fit right back into a top 6 role, especially with Landeskog being out this year. He's done fantastic in a top 6 role, so hopefully they can fit him back into the lineup, and he's not too rusty given the fact he's only missed about a week and a half. So good to get Nichushkin back, but I think the more important name to get back was Byram. Byram's missed close to 3 months due to his injury. He's going to be activated off of IR probably within the next day or two, and he should be back in the game action. The Avalanche have a really deep D-core, so they were able to make do without guys like Byram and Manson, and for sometimes Samuel Girard, and they were able to make do without these guys. And getting these guys back is just going to make this Avalanche team even more lethal. The Avalanche have been getting healthier over the last little while, and they've gotten themselves back into the playoff race, back into a playoff position. So seeing them get healthier is going to be a scary sight for a lot of these other teams. The Avalanche are still a pretty good team. They just had a lot of injury troubles this year, so given the fact that the Avalanche will be a pretty scary team to deal with over the next little while as they continue to get healthier, getting Byram and Nichushkin back are huge pieces. Byram's a good third, second pair defenseman. I know he's definitely suffered his fair share of injuries over the past couple of seasons, so hopefully he's not too rusty and doesn't need too much time to get back up to speed, but Byram's a really good young defenseman that they will really like getting back, especially with Josh Manson still injured. As for Nichushkin, he should be slotted right back into the top 6 and do some really good things to the Avalanche in that top 6. Good to see Nichushkin and Byram getting back and should be able to get into game action in the next game or two for the Avalanche. And as the Avalanche team continues to get healthier, they'll only get better than what they are right now. Over with the Islanders, they've also had a few good injury updates, as Noah Dobson and Hudson Fasching have both returned from their injuries and were able to get back into game action in the Islanders' most recent game. Now for Dobson, he only missed about 2 weeks due to his injury, and he was never really placed on IR either, so it's good to see him get back. He did have a lower body injury, so it's good to see him only miss a few games. Dobson's a really good top 4 defenseman for the Islanders, probably their most offensive defenseman, and getting him back is going to help the Islanders team a lot. As for Fasching, not as big of an addition. He's more of a bomb 6 forward. It was called up when the Islanders were running into a lot of injuries, but still he showed that he can be a really good 4th line forward for the Islanders and is a really good player, and getting him back is pretty good. He's missed more time than Dobson, being out for the last 3 weeks due to his injury, and he was on IR, so he's been activated and gone back into game action. Good for Fasching to also recover from his lower body injury, and he should be able to get back into game action, should be able to be a good 4th line forward for the Islanders for now. So good to see the Islanders get some healthy bodies back, even though they still have a few guys injured. Getting Fasching back should help the depth on the forward group, and getting Dobson back should continue to improve that really good defense. And lastly, with the Florida Panthers, the Panthers have now gotten both of their goalies back, because Sergei Bobrovsky's been activated off of injury reserve, and Spencer Knight has returned from his injury. Now, Bobrovsky was placed on injury reserve a little while ago. He's missed about 2.5-3 weeks due to his lower body injury, and it's good to see him get back. Bobrovsky's a really good goaltender for Florida, so it's good to see him back in the game action for the Florida Panthers. He's definitely an overpaid goalie in my opinion, but he is the Panthers starter right now, so good to see him get back. Same thing with Spencer Knight. There was a lot of talk about a week and a half ago that he was going to return from his injury, but he never did, and he was still dealing with his injury. Knight's missed about 2.5 weeks as well due to his injury, but good to see Knight get back as well. He was dealing with the upper body injury, so good to see Knight and Bobrovsky get back. That's their tandem in their net back. They had done okay with their other tandem of Lyon and Guzda, but those are more minor league goalies. So good to see Bobrovsky and Knight get back for the Florida Panthers, and with the Panthers continuing their hunt for a playoff spot, getting their 2-star goalies back is a huge boost for them. Now that's all the injury updates I'm going to talk about for today. Next, we go over to a trade that happened recently. It was a smaller trade, but a significant one nonetheless, as the Seattle Kraken have acquired Jaycob Megna from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a conditional 4th round pick. Now for the Seattle Kraken, this is a fantastic addition. One of the problems I saw with the Kraken was their depth on defense was a little bit weak when they had guys like Jamie Oleksiak and Justin Schultz injured. They had to call upon a guy from the AHL like a Gustav Olofsson, who I think is a good AHL player, but I'm not exactly sure if the Kraken would be thrilled to have him play on the third pair in like a playoff game. So I think getting Megna is a really good addition for the Kraken. He can be a good third pair defenseman. He's shown with the Sharks he can also play good top 4 minutes. He's played a lot with Erik Karlsson this year, and he's actually done quite well. He started his career with Anaheim, then he played a few seasons in the minors, and after that he played with the Sharks, and he actually got a really big opportunity last year at the NHL level and really capitalized on it, getting 2 goals and 8 points in 44 games. He wasn't a consistent NHL forward for the Sharks, but he got into a good chunk of games for the Sharks last year. And that led into this year, where he's had a career season so far this year, putting up a goal and 12 points in 48 games. Now, I'm not sure if he can really crack the Kraken's top 4 lineup. I think that the Kraken are definitely going to be a really good defensive team. It's just their depth that I think we're a little bit concerned about. But I definitely think he should definitely challenge for a third pair spot, whether it be with Carson Seuss or with Jamie Oleksiak or whoever it is. I think he could probably definitely do a really good job as like a third pair defenseman for the Seattle Kraken and really help shore up that defense. And I think getting him into the lineup for the Kraken will be really good. And even though he's not the flashiest of defensemen, I think the addition is going to be a great job for the Kraken, especially given the fact it only cost a 4th round pick. So I definitely think this is a really great move for Seattle. He's also not a rental. He's signed for this year and next year at only a $763,000 cap hit. So a really smart move by Seattle to get a good cheap defenseman who can play consistent third pair minutes for them. And should definitely help them over the next couple of seasons. As for San Jose, we already know that they're going to be sellers this year. They started about a week and a half ago when they moved Matt Nieto to Colorado. So I expect this not to be the last move that the Sharks make, and I expect them to continue to make some other moves. Getting a 4th round pick for Megna back is good. I thought they could probably maybe get like a 4th round pick and another player, or maybe a low 3rd round pick for Megna. So not exactly sure if this is maybe the absolute best offer they could do, but definitely think this is a good offer for San Jose. Megna was probably not going to stay very much longer with the Sharks, so to sell him off to Seattle is a pretty good move for San Jose. They also got a good 4th round pick for this year. Now, the condition on the 4th round pick is the Seattle Kraken own their own and the Colorado Avalanche's 4th round pick for this year, and they have by June 15th to tell the Sharks which 4th round pick they'll be giving the Sharks, either their own or Colorado's. So Sharks will get a 4th round pick in this year's draft. It just depends on which one Seattle winds up giving them. But I think getting a good 4th round pick in a very deep draft for a depth defenseman who can play third line minutes, I think is a pretty good deal for the San Jose Sharks. I would expect the Sharks to continue to move players. I mean, watch out for maybe a guy like Timo Meier to be next. There's been a lot of speculation about him. If not him, maybe a guy like Nick Bonino, maybe goalie James Reimer. There's been some talk about Kevin LeBanc. So the Sharks are definitely going to be a seller this year. It's going to be interesting to see who they move out before a deadline. For the Kraken, I think there's a possibility they could still maybe add. We know they're not a really good face-off team, so maybe they go after a guy who can play really good center minutes. And while Megna is a really good defensive addition, maybe they go after another guy who can really shore up that defense as well. But definitely, good move for the Kraken to get a good depth defenseman in Megna. And for the Sharks, getting a 4th round pick for a defenseman who probably wasn't going to be with the Sharks for very much longer is a pretty good deal. So good move by both Pacific Division teams, and I expect them to continue to do business over the next few weeks before a trade line. And now we get over to the trade rumor part of the video. We'll start with the Detroit Red Wings, as there have been a few updates over the past little while. On the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman said that he's getting the feeling that the Red Wings are starting to draw the line in the sand of how high they're willing to go to sign Dylan Larkin. And if Larkin really wants to sign with the Detroit Red Wings, he may have to take a pay cut. So it's definitely looking like the Red Wings are going to try and sign Larkin. Larkin's a really good player, and we've heard from Larkin himself that he really does like Detroit and he would love to remain with the Red Wings. But the fact of the matter is, We have seen before, as Steve Yzerman, who's now the GM of Detroit, did the same sort of thing with Steven Stamkos, where he drew a line in the sand and said, this is only as high as we're going. So if Larkin really does want to remain with the Red Wings, he may have to take some sort of a pay cut. I'm not sure exactly how much the Red Wings are sort of trying to offer Larkin, but I would have to guess it's probably at least $8 million for Larkin. I mean, his current deal is currently at $6.1 million, and he's due for a significant raise. I mean, last year he had a fantastic season, putting up 31 goals and 69 points, and he's had a pretty good season this year too, putting up 15 goals and 43 points in 47 games. So he's hovering around that point per game mark, and he's done really well. If you look at some of these other teams who have signed good top-line centers, I mean, you sort of look at basically the same guys who Horvat was looking at. You look at Kyrou and Thomas, who had about 8.1 mil, Hintz, who had just under 8.5 mil, and Barzal, who had 9.1 mil. And given the fact Larkin's probably a little bit more offensive than some of these guys, it's quite possible to say that Larkin is looking at a market around 8.5 and 9 million. So given the fact that he could possibly get something like that on an open market, I know that some people have said that maybe Horvat could have gotten at least a $9 million contract if he did go to open market. So there's definitely might be some teams, like maybe a Boston Bruins or a Winnipeg Jets, or a team who really has some questions about the future at center, could wind up signing Larkin to a major extension. But it does sound like Larkin does really want to remain a Detroit Red Wings. So we'll have to wait and see how the situation plays out. Larkin also has a full no movement clause. So if he was to be traded before the deadline, given the fact he is a pending unrestricted free agent, he would have to approve the trade. So it's definitely going to be an interesting thing to see what happens. I still think Larkin and Detroit maybe find a way to get a deal done. I still think Larkin really does want to remain a Red Wing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they wound up getting the deal done. But it just sounds like Detroit is starting to draw a line in the sand of how high they're willing to go for Larkin, and that they may not get a deal done before the deadline. And if so, that will lead to some trade speculation over the next little while. Over with the Vancouver Canucks, there have been some recent talks that, once again, Brock Boeser seems to be the next candidate to be moved for the Vancouver Canucks. There have been a few recent reports. First, on the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman said that the Canucks and Bo Horvat were really relieved to get that situation dealt with, and that it's finally over and it's not dragging on anymore. And he said he sort of gets the same feeling that they want that Brock Boeser situation to be done. He said that the Canucks may have to take a little bit of Boeser's salary or take on maybe a shorter term bad contract to make the deal work for another team. But there's definitely some talk that Boeser is probably the next one to be moved. Boeser's a really good forward, but the acquiring team would have to hope that Brock Boeser can continue to be a good player and be the sort of 25-30 goal scorer he was in the past in his first few seasons with Vancouver. And then Frank Seravalli said when discussing Brock Boeser that he linked a couple of names to possibly watch out for in trying to acquire Brock Boeser, as he listed the New Jersey Devils, the Rangers, the Penguins, the Capitals, the Wild, the Sabres, and the Flames as possible options for Boeser. Now, I think Pittsburgh would be a really good fit for Boeser, playing with maybe a guy like Malkin or Crosby on that top line. That would be a really good fit for Boeser. Not exactly sure if the Penguins could make it work cap-wise, but I would definitely think that could be a good option. We know Jersey and the Rangers are both looking at top-end players. We know that the Devils have been linked to guys like Tarasenko and Meyer. The Rangers have been linked to guys like Meyer and Patrick Kane. So we know they're looking for good, lethal top six wingers. Those two could definitely have interest in Boeser, I think. If they were to maybe miss out on a big name or two, Boeser could easily be a good plan B for one of those teams. We've definitely heard some talk about the Capitals possibly being interested. Maybe something like a Boeser for Mansa deal. I'm still not sure if the Canucks would be willing to do that. But definitely think that with the Caps signing some of their players recently, like a Milano, they definitely have a lot of good forwards for the next little while. So not exactly sure how they will be able to fit him in their contract situation, especially with the Caps not having very many defensemen signed beyond this season. But definitely would be another interesting team to see try and acquire him. You got Minnesota. Boeser has connections to Minnesota, and he's been one of the more speculated places where he could go. The Wild do still have some cap problems this year and next year as well, so it'd be really difficult to see Minnesota try and make a move. Do need some scoring help for this year, but given the fact that they don't have much cap space right now and after this year, it'd be really hard to fit Boeser cap hit in for this year plus the next 2 seasons for a while. So I'm not exactly sure if they'll be a really great fit. For Buffalo, they could add at the deadline, I think. This could be the first season where we see Buffalo actually add at the deadline. I think, not exactly sure if Boeser would be the best fit. I think they definitely have a lot of good young talent. And maybe adding Boeser is a really good option for Buffalo. They definitely have the cap space to make it work, but just not exactly sure if that's the player they go after. And then with the Calgary Flames, I know I've talked about how the Flames really do need another top 6 winger, and going after a guy like Boeser or Garland from Vancouver would have been a smart move for the Flames. So maybe Boeser going to the Flames isn't too surprising either. And Frank Seravalli also said that the Canucks may be willing to retain up to $1 million on Boeser's contract to bump his cap hit down to a $5.65 million deal. So definitely think there's a lot of teams interested in Boeser. He's probably going to be one of the bigger names to watch out for over the next little while. It would not be surprising to me if he wound up being traded in the next week or two, well before the deadline. And it definitely seems like the Canucks and Boeser really want this to sort of come to an end. And lastly, here with the Vegas Golden Knights, not too much updates, but we know that Mark Stone is going to be out indefinitely. And on the 32 Thoughts podcast on Friday, Elliot Friedman discussed this, as well as on the TSN Insider Trading video, that while he hasn't been officially assigned to be out for the season, there is a very good likelihood that Mark Stone, who just had back surgery, will be out for the entirety of the season, and the Knights will be able to place him on long-term injury reserve and open up a lot of cap space to work with before deadline. And that is huge news, as if Stone does wind up missing the rest of the season, the Golden Knights could go out and try and replace him as best as they could. I mean, before this, they were talking about some good depth additions, like I know Ivan Barbashev and LTIR were some of the guys who was linked to Vegas. There have been a couple of other maybe depth end players, like maybe a Nick Ritchie in Arizona, if trade maybe an Oscar Sundqvist. Some more depth guys who could be good third-line forwards and really help round out the Golden Knights team. But with the added cap space and the fact that Vegas is always in win-now mode, from their first year they came in, they've always been in win-now mode. I mean, the first year they went after Erik Karlsson, they missed out on him. They got like Thomas Tatar. In their second year, they got Mark Stone. That offseason, they had Max Pacioretty and Paul Stastny. I mean, the Knights always seem to be swinging for the fences. I mean, even last year, they went out and acquired Jack Eichel, which was a very difficult move to make, but they were able to do it. So I definitely think that with the newfound cap space for the Vegas Golden Knights, there is a huge possibility that they go out and maybe try and acquire a top-end winger. I know there's been talk about maybe Tarasenko to Vegas. I know on the 32 Thoughts podcast, Jeff Merrick said that maybe Timo Meier would make sense with the Golden Knights. I've heard some people say maybe Patrick Kane. I know maybe a guy like James Van Riemsdyk could help the Golden Knights. I know he's more of a third-line forward, but he could still be a really good addition. Ivan Barbashev's been linked to the Golden Knights. He's not the best of additions, but he's still a really good middle six winger. And maybe if the Red Wings do decide to trade maybe a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi, I think if Stone is out for the rest of the season, it is definitely a huge possibility the Golden Knights go and try and acquire the biggest forward at the trade line, whether it be Tarasenko, Kane, Meier, Bertuzzi, maybe a lower end guy still like a Barbashev or James Van Riemsdyk, but they now have a lot more cap space to play with the injury to Stone if he's out for the season, and it would not shock me at all if they went out and got one of the better top 6 wingers at the trade deadline with their newfound cap space. So that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog which I will leave a link to in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.